The container smelled like burnt metal and old fear. Kale noticed the smell before he noticed anything else. He had been walking the lower cargo deck of Vareth Point for the past hour, checking on 3 specimen crates his department had received from a supply run near the outer belt. 2 of the crates were fine. The third had a dent in its side panel that looked like it had been made from the inside. He crouched down and put his ear to the metal. Something was breathing in there. He did not call security. He did not back away. He reached into his side bag, pulled out a small flat tool, and popped the side latch open the same way he had opened 100 crates before, carefully, without sudden movement. Inside, curled around itself like a wounded animal trying to disappear, was something massive. Dark copper scales caught the low cargo light. A wing was folded at a wrong angle. One large hand pressed against a wound on the left side of its ribcage where the scales had been cracked and something dark was seeping through. Kale looked at it for 3 full seconds. Then he opened his field bag and started working. He had treated a Gorath once, a reptilian species with scales like loose tiles that could cut through standard gloves. He had also treated a Ven jellyfish, which had no pain response and also no sense of personal space. A wounded creature was a wounded creature. The biology changed. The process did not. He pressed a clean cloth against the wound. He spoke in a low, steady voice, the same tone he used when he was trying to keep something from panicking. "I am not going to hurt you. I am going to slow the bleeding. You do not have to move." The creature did not move, but its breathing changed. Kale worked for about 4 minutes before the eyes opened. Gold, like someone had melted coins and poured them into a living face. They fixed on him with an intelligence that made his hands pause for just a moment before he kept going. "You are either very brave," the creature said, voice low and rough and precise, "or very stupid." "My colleague says both," Kale said. "Hold still." The creature held still. It took him another 10 minutes to clean the wound, close the worst of it with a field seal, and wrap the area with pressure cloth. The wing was not broken, just badly wrenched. He stabilized it with a brace he had to improvise from 2 splints and some cable cord. It was not elegant. It would hold. When he was done, he sat back on his heels and looked at his patient properly for the first time. She was enormous. Even folded into the container, she was twice his height. The scales on her face were finer than the ones on her arms, darker near the jaw, almost black. There was something on her left shoulder that looked like it had once been a piece of armor before someone had hit it very hard. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing that concerns you," she said. "You are in my specimen crate." A pause that was not planned. Kale stood up, dusted off his knees, and looked at the container around her. Standard commercial unit. No markings except a forwarding code that had been scratched off by hand. Whoever had been chasing her had not wanted a trail. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I can do many things," she said, which was not an answer. "My lab is 2 levels up. It is private. It has a bed that will not hold you, but it has a floor that will, and it does not have any surveillance that reports to station security." He picked up his bag. "Or you can stay in the crate, your decision." She looked at him for a long moment. He did not look away, but he did not push. He had learned a long time ago that the moment you pushed a frightened creature, it stopped being able to choose. "Your name," she said. "Kale Rion, xenobiologist, Research Division, civilian contract, yours." Another pause, longer this time. "Sora," she said. Just the one name. He did not ask for more. Getting her out of the cargo level without being seen took 20 minutes and used every back corridor Kale had learned in 3 years on the station. Sora moved quietly for her size, one hand occasionally touching the wall for balance, never once making a sound about the pain he could see in the set of her jaw. His lab was small and smelled like preserved specimens and coffee that had gone cold twice. Luna was at the far bench sorting genetic samples when they came through the door. The small marsupial looked up, saw Sora, and went completely still the way prey animals do when their entire body decides that if it does not move the problem will go away. "That is Luno," Kale said. "He is harmless." "I was not worried about him," Sora said. Luno slowly slid off his stool and sat on the floor behind it instead. Kale pointed Sora toward the open area near the specimen wall, where there was enough space for her to sit with her back against something solid. She moved to it without comment and lowered herself down with the careful control of someone who refused to show how much it cost. Kale made a second check of the wound seal, still holding. He left a water container within her reach and went back to his bench. Behind him, he heard the faint sound of her exhale, long and slow, like something being set down after being carried a very long way. He did not remark on it, he kept working. She watched him for a long time before she closed her eyes. On the second day, Sora started asking questions. Not big ones, small ones first, like a creature testing the depth of water before it stepped in. She asked what the jars on the specimen shelf contained. She asked why Kale labeled everything twice, once in Galactic Standard and once in a second script she did not recognize. She asked what the sound was that came from the wall unit every 3 hours. Kale answered each one without looking up from his work. The jars held preserved tissue samples from 14 different species. The second script was his own shorthand system. The wall unit ran a humidity cycle for the live plant specimens in the back cabinet. "You made your own written language," she said. "Just a shorthand." "That is not a small thing," she said. He looked up then. She was sitting against the specimen wall the same way she had settled on the first night, wings folded, tail curled around her, watching him with those gold eyes that never seemed to fully rest. The wound seal had held well. Her color was better. The tension in her jaw had softened. "Most people do not notice that," he said. "Most people are not paying attention," she said. She went back to watching. He went back to work. By the third day the questions were different. Longer. She asked about the creatures he kept samples from and what had happened to them when their ecosystems changed. He told her about a species near the outer rim that had adapted its entire breeding cycle in 2 generations after a trade route was cut through their feeding grounds. She listened without speaking until he finished and then said, "They changed themselves instead of fighting the thing that changed them." "They survived," Kale said. "Is that the same thing?" He thought about it. For them it was. She was quiet after that for a long time. Luno, who had spent the first day behind his stool and the second day pretending to be very interested in samples on the far side of the lab, had by the third day moved close enough to his normal bench to work properly. He had not spoken to her directly, but he had stopped flinching when she shifted position. That evening Luno told Kale, quietly, that the dragonkin visiting the station's public data archive every night between the second and fourth station, Heir was using a hood and walking low, and was definitely Sora. Kale looked at him. "I went for a snack," Luno said. "I have eyes." Kale said nothing about it to Sora that night. In the morning before she woke, he left a stack of 7 books on the floor beside her. Old ones, physical copies worn at the corners, 3 on Earth biology, 1 on human history, 1 that was a novel fiction, the kind that had no strategic value whatsoever. A short note beside them said only, "In case the archives are slow." When he came back from the morning supply run, she was holding the novel, not reading it, just holding it, turning it over in her large hands with the careful attention she might give something fragile. "This is a story," she said. "It is not real." "No. Why do humans write things that are not real?" Kale set down his bag and thought about how to answer that. Because the real things are too heavy to carry alone sometimes. The stories help you practice for them. She turned the book over once more. She did not put it down. That afternoon she asked him why he had come to Vereth Point, not why humans came, why he had come. He told her the truth, which was that he had requested this posting 3 times before it was approved, because the species diversity in this sector existed nowhere else in charted space, and he wanted to understand how so many different kinds of life had found a way to exist in the same place without destroying each other. "Have you found an answer?" she asked. "Working on it," he said. She made a sound that might have been a laugh, low and short, like she had not used it in a while and was not sure it still fit. He did not point it out. He filed it quietly in the back of his mind, the same place he filed the way she tucked the book under her wing when she slept, and the way she always waited until he finished speaking before she responded, fully and completely, the way most people never bothered to. On the 4th day, a message came to the lab's external port. No sender name, Drakville routing code, short. Sara read it and her face went still in a way it had not been still since the first night. "I have to go back," she said. Cale nodded. He did not ask why or when. "There is a courier ship leaving from Dock 7 the day after next," he said. "It passes through Drakville space on the northern run." She looked at him. "How do you know that?" "I checked the transit board," he said, "in case." She held his gaze for a long moment. Something moved behind those gold eyes that she did not put into words. Then she looked back at the specimen jars and the double-labeled shelves and the quietly humming wall unit, and she breathed out slowly. "In case," she repeated very quietly. She picked up the novel from beside her and did not put it back down again. Counselor Reth had a gift for finding problems that were not yet problems and making them worse. He had served the Dragon Empire for 40 years by doing exactly that. He found soft spots in walls before the walls cracked. He found doubt in soldiers before it became desertion. He was very good at his work, and he had absolutely no intention of allowing the Emperor's heir to develop an attachment to a human scientist on a trade station, while an imperial expansion campaign waited for her return. He filed his report to the throne room with calm, careful language. He called it a security concern. He called Kale Rian an unknown variable in proximity to the heir during a period of strategic vulnerability. He did not use the word attachment. He used the phrase irregular behavioral pattern instead. The Emperor read the report and said nothing. He asked for it to be logged and he asked for updates. Reth smiled to himself. That was enough for now. At Verath Point, Kale was waist-deep in the station's biodome sector, trying to collect water samples from an artificial wetland that the station's ecological board had let go feral over the past 6 years. 3 different species had moved in uninvited, built competing habitat structures from recycled station material, and were now living in an arrangement that no biologist had designed, and that was somehow working. Sora had come with him. She had not announced that she was coming. She had simply stood up when he reached for his sample bag, and he had handed her the secondary case without comment, and they had walked to the biodome together. She moved differently outside the lab, more careful, more aware of the space around her, but also, he noticed, more present. Less like someone performing stillness and more like someone who had forgotten for a moment that they were supposed to be performing anything. Inside the biodome, she stood very still at the edge of the wetland and watched one of the uninvited species, a 4-legged builder creature from the station's eastern cargo ring, carry a piece of mesh across the water with the focus of someone doing the most important work in the world. "It knows exactly what it is doing," she said. "It is following a pattern from its home environment," Kale said from the water's edge. "The mesh is not what it would use back home, but the structure it builds with it is identical." "It carried its home inside its head," Sora said, "even when everything around it changed." Kale looked up at her. She was not watching the creature anymore. She was looking at the middle distance, somewhere past the biodome wall. "That is one way to read it," he said. They worked for 2 hours without hurry. Sora held cases, passed tools, and at one point crouched down to look at a cluster of roots that had grown through a section of drainage pipe in a way that had blocked nothing and rerouted everything. She studied it for a long time. "This should have caused a failure," she said. "It should have," Kale agreed. "Instead, it made a new path." She did not respond to that, but she remembered it. He could tell by the way she filed it away behind her eyes. On the way back, she told him about the expansion campaign. She said it plainly, watching his face the whole time. He listened. When she described which systems were being targeted, he asked careful questions about the populations there, what species, what settlements, what trade dependencies they had built. She answered each question, and with each answer her voice got a little quieter, not from shame, but from the weight of hearing the information spoken out loud to someone who was asking about the people and not the territory. "What happens to the settlements?" he asked. "They are absorbed," she said. "They continue." "As what?" A pause. "As subjects of the Empire." "Do they choose that?" She did not answer that one. He did not push. He asked her instead about Earth, because she had been reading about it in the archive, and because he could see she had questions she had not found a way to ask yet. He told her about rain, which Drakville worlds did not have the same way, just water falling from the sky with no purpose and no target, just falling because that is what water did when a planet was that kind of planet. He told her about the markets near where he grew up, all sound and smell, and people arguing over prices for things that cost almost nothing. He told her about the way people lined up to watch sunsets sometimes, standing on bridges or hillsides with no plan, just watching because something was beautiful, and that felt like reason enough. She listened to all of it. "They do this with no strategic purpose," she said. "None at all," Kale said. "And the empire of your species permits it." "The empire of my species has very little say in what people do with a good sunset." This time she definitely laughed. It was brief and she covered it with a cleared throat, but it was real and it was there. When they reached the dock corridor, the Imperial courier ship was already visible through the port window, docked and waiting. Sara looked at it and went still again, all the ease of the biodome leaving her face like water leaving a shore. She had 2 hours. Kale stood beside her and did not ask what she was thinking. He already knew she would tell him when she was ready, or she would not tell him at all. Either way, he would be standing here. She stared at the ship for a long time. The courier ship's passenger manifest had 42 names on it when it left Vareth Point. The 43rd was added 12 minutes before departure. Registered category: Civilian Research Transit. Academic access request to Drakville-adjacent space. All documentation in order. The port clerk approved it without looking up because the documentation was very thorough, and the clerk had 17 other things to process before the shift ended. Sara found Kale in the rear passenger hold, sitting with his field bag between his feet and a data tablet in his hands, reading something about soil composition on rocky worlds. He looked up when she stopped in front of him. She looked at him for a very long time. "You forgot your book," he said. He reached into his bag and held up the novel she had left on the floor of the lab when she boarded. She took it. She stood there another moment. Then she sat down across from him without a word and opened it to the page she had marked with a strip of pressure cloth from his supply kit. From inside Kale's bag, after about 30 seconds, a small furred face appeared at the zip opening. "The station felt very quiet," Luno said. "Also, I may have already eaten my 2 days of packed meals." Sara looked at him. Luno looked at Sara. Then Luno very slowly looked at Kale. "You did not tell me she would be on this ship," he said. "I did not know she would be," Kale said. Luno considered this and then retreated back into the bag. A moment later he emerged fully, climbed onto the seat next to Kale, and took out his own tablet with the practiced air of someone who had decided the situation was now simply normal. The journey to the Drakville throne world took 4 days. On the first day, Kale spent most of his time watching the crew. The Drakville soldiers who served as escort detail were not hostile to him, but they were watchful in the way of people who had been told to notice things. He greeted them when they passed, learned 2 of their names, and asked one of them a genuine question about the way the ship's corridor lighting was calibrated to different spectrum levels in different sections. The soldier explained it with visible surprise, like he had not expected the question to be real. By the second day, the soldier had started a short nod when he passed Kale in the corridor. Small thing. Kale filed it in the same quiet place he filed everything. Sara moved through the ship like someone preparing for something. She ate alone. She read reports on a locked screen. She slept very little. But each evening she returned to the rear hold and sat across from Kale, and sometimes they talked, and sometimes they did not, and both were equally comfortable. On the second evening she told him that she had read almost the entire novel. He asked what she thought. She said the main character made very poor decisions. She does, Kale agreed. But you understand why, Sora said. Yes. That is strange. The character is foolish and you still want her to succeed. That is the point, Kale said. Sora looked down at the page. Your species writes entire books to teach people to care about someone who keeps getting things wrong. We write thousands of them, Kale said. She was quiet for a moment, and it works. Most of the time. On the third day, a secure channel message came from Counselor Reth. Sara took it in a private room and came back with her jaw set in the way Kale had learned to read as controlled anger rather than cold. She said nothing about it, but she sat down, and for the first time looked like she was not reading her novel, just holding it. Kale did not ask. Luno, who had no such restraint, asked if everything was all right. Sara looked at him. Luno immediately became very interested in his own lap. The council has chosen a mate for me, she said, not to either of them specifically. To the Heir, maybe. To the idea that saying it out loud would make it easier to hold. A general. He has won 4 campaigns. He has never read a book that was not a military record. Nobody said anything. He is everything the Empire requires, she said. Luno very quietly said, that sounds exhausting. Sara looked at him with an expression that was not anger. It was something closer to gratitude, the kind that comes when someone says the exact thing you could not let yourself say. On the 4th day, the throne world appeared on the viewport. It was vast and burning gold from space, lit by a binary star system that bathed everything in a double light that looked almost like fire. Ancient cities covered the surface like a living pattern. It was not beautiful the way Verath Point was beautiful, small and functional and full of different species eating lunch near each other. It was beautiful the way something very old and very powerful is beautiful, from a distance, with a clear understanding of what it could do. Kale looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Sara. She was watching the planet with an expression he had not seen on her before. Not pride, not dread. Something in between, the face of someone who loves a place and is not sure the place loves them back in a way they can accept. Ready, he said. No, she said. Me neither, he said. Let us go anyway. She stood up. She tucked the novel under her arm. She walked toward the docking ramp and he walked beside her, and behind them Luno climbed down from his seat and followed without being asked. The throne hall of the Drakville Empire had witnessed the surrender of 40 civilizations. The floor was black stone quarried from the first world the Empire had ever taken, and it had been polished by 400 years of feet that came to kneel on it. The ceiling was open to the binary sky, ringed by fire-cut stone that turned the double light into something that felt like standing inside a sun. The space was not designed to make visitors comfortable. It was designed to make them understand what they were standing in front of. Emperor Drakville sat at the end of it. He was old in the way of Drakville elders, which meant he had the stillness of something that had long ago stopped needing to prove what it was. His scales were dark and worn smooth with age, the copper long since burned to near black. His eyes, when they settled on Sora, were not unkind. They were absolute. He did not look at Kale. Counselor Reth stood to the left with the posture of someone waiting to be useful. He had arranged for 2 guards to be near the door, just inside the threshold. A precaution, the kind that looked like procedure. The Emperor spoke to Sora about what the Empire needed. He spoke about the campaign, the timing, the bloodlines of the general chosen for her, the duty that existed before personal preference was permitted to speak. He spoke without heat. The words had the weight of stone walls, not fire. Reth raised one hand to signal the guards toward Kale. "No," Sora said, "just the one word." The guards stopped. The Emperor looked at her. "He stays," she said. A silence in which the firelight moved and nothing else did. Then the Emperor looked at Kale for the first time. Not the way he would look at a threat, not the way he would look at a subject. The way he would look at something that had been described to him incorrectly, and he was now making his own assessment. "You are the human," the Emperor said. "Kale Rian," Kale said. "Xenobiologist, I apologize for standing in your hall uninvited. I am grateful you have not had me removed." A pause. "You are not afraid," the Emperor said. "I am afraid," Kale said. "I am standing in front of the ruler of 11 star systems in a hall made specifically to be overwhelming. I would be foolish not to be afraid." A beat. "But being afraid of something does not always mean you should leave." Reth made a small sound. The Emperor did not. "What do you want in my empire?" the Emperor asked. "Nothing from it," Kale said. "I wanted to understand it." "Why?" Kale did not hesitate. "Because your daughter matters to me, and you matter to her, so by that logic you matter to me as well. I do not think it is possible to understand someone without understanding what shaped them." The hall was very quiet. A flamebird shifted on a stone rafter above, and the sound of its talons was the loudest thing in the room. The Emperor turned his eyes back to Sora. And this time, as Kale had hoped, and as Sora had perhaps not let herself believe, the Emperor truly looked at her. Not at the heir, at his daughter, at the set of her shoulders and the way she was standing and whatever it was in her face that had not been there the last time he saw her. Sora spoke. She told her father that she would not lead the campaign. She said it clearly and without anger, the way someone speaks when they have decided a thing and are not asking permission, only delivering information. She told him she would not take the chosen general as her mate. She told him that she understood the Empire needed an heir who would carry its fire forward, and she believed she could still be that heir, but she would carry it in her own way or not at all. "I am not refusing your legacy," she said. "I am refusing to become a version of it that does not know why the people inside the Empire matter, not just as subjects, as people." Reth cleared his throat. "The heir is clearly under the influence of." "Reth," the Emperor said. Reth stopped. The Emperor stood. He was very tall and very old, and when he moved the entire hall seemed to take a breath. He walked down from the throne dais slowly and stopped in front of his daughter. He looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at Kale again. Then he looked at the novel tucked under Sora's arm, worn and marked and clearly read more than once. He said nothing. He turned and walked back to the dais. He did not sit. He stood with his back to the hall and looked out through the open roof at the binary sky where 2 suns were finishing their long crossing of the day. "You will have a month," he said, not turning. "Come back to me with a proposal, not a refusal. A proposal, show me what you mean." Sora let out a breath that she had been holding since the ship docked. "And the human," the Emperor said, still not turning. "He will have a formal research pass, civilian access, 2 months. Reth," the Emperor said again, "you will present yourself tomorrow morning for a full review of your recent reports, all of them." This time Reth said nothing at all. Kale stood in the middle of the black stone floor and did not move. Sometimes the best thing after something very large shifted was to hold still and let it settle. Sora looked at him, he looked at her. Above them, the flamebird folded its wings and was still. 3 months after the throne hall, a notice went out across Imperial channels about a new office within the Drakville government. One short paragraph. No ceremony. The title given was Imperial Liaison for Contested Territories. Most of the species who received the notice did not understand what it meant. Diplomats who had spent decades trying to communicate with the Empire understood immediately. They read it twice to make sure they had not made an error. Reth was not there to read it. He had been removed from the council 6 weeks prior during what the official record called a comprehensive review of advisory conduct. The official record was very dry about it. People who knew Reth understood that the Emperor had simply grown tired of being managed. He had not been imprisoned. He had been sent to administrate a supply depot on the Outer Rim, which for a man of his ambitions was a far more precise punishment. Sora's proposal had taken 9 days to write. She had submitted it on the 10th day. She and her father had spoken for 4 hours behind a closed door. No one outside knew what was said. What followed was the quiet cancellation of the expansion campaign, attributed in public to a strategic reassessment of timing and resource allocation. The general who had been chosen as Sora's mate was reassigned to the eastern border garrison. He did not seem disappointed. He had always preferred a clear enemy to a complicated one. Kale was back at Vareth Point. He had his 2 months of Imperial research access, and had used most of it cataloging 3 previously undocumented symbiotic relationships in Drakville-adjacent ecosystems. His field notes from that period were later flagged by 2 separate academic journals as unusually thorough. He did not think they were unusual. He had simply had more time to pay attention, because Sora had been with him for the first 6 weeks, learning how to look at small things rather than large ones, asking questions that made him think harder about his own answers. They communicated across the distance now. It was not simple. The routing between human-accessible networks and Drakville Imperial channels involved 3 relay points and a processing delay that meant nothing was ever quite real-time. They had developed a rhythm around it, leaving messages the way you might leave a letter, with the understanding that the reply would come when it came and would be worth waiting for. Luno had written a short academic paper about the events at Vareth Point and the Throne World. He called it the Rion Anomaly. He defined the anomaly formally as the measurable tendency of humans to cause civilizational change through ordinary decency towards someone who needed it, with no strategic intention and no awareness that this was happening. The paper was 3 pages long and included a footnote that said, "Further study required, as the subject continues to be anomalous on a daily basis." Kale read it and said nothing. Luno framed the rejection of his feelings as evidence of the anomaly and added a second footnote. 6 weeks after Kale returned to Vareth Point, a formal request arrived at the station's academic office from a young Drakville soldier named Orath. The request was for placement on a cross-species exchange program at a human university on the outer academic circuit. It was the first such request ever submitted from anyone within the Drakville military structure. The station's academic board approved it in 48 hours, with a personal note from the head of the board that said they were delighted and also slightly in shock. Orath had been one of the guards at the throne hall door. Kale had not known that when he first learned about the request. When he found out, he sat with it for a while, quietly, thinking about the way things move through people and come out changed on the other side in directions nobody planned. Then a package arrived. It was wrapped simply. Inside was the novel he had left for Sora. She had sent it back, which confused him for a moment until he opened it. She had written in the margins, not neat annotations, real handwriting, sometimes cramped because the margins were too small for what she wanted to say, sometimes very large because what she wanted to say was short. Arguments with the narrator. Questions directed at no one. 3 observations about human behavior that were genuinely insightful, and 1 that was deeply wrong in a way that made him smile. On the last page, in careful script that looked like it had been written and rewritten, there was a single line in Drakville. He had it translated by the station's language office the next morning. It said, "You were right about Earth." He sat with that for a while too. Then he took a new book from the shelf, one he had been meaning to read for 2 years. He started at the first page, and in the margin next to the first paragraph, he wrote a question, the first of what he knew would be many, meant for a reader who was very far away and would take her time getting back to him. He was fine with that. Good things did not have to be fast, they just had to be true. The Dragon Empire watched in silence as its heir chose love over legacy. What the Empire had not accounted for was that love, when it was the patient and unhurried kind, had a way of looking exactly like the future.